Today, a powerful new report on the future of media, democracy, and trust.
Then, how soon till AI can read your lips?
And finally, Jeff Bezos and Blackmail. It's a showdown.
I'm Gene DeRose, and this is Future Forward.
I'm Steve Rosenbaum, and we are ready to launch. Gene, it is a jam-packed show. We have a 3-act show for you. Podcast listeners, hold on to your seats. We have good stuff for you today. And we should just start right up top with the night report, because I have to tell you, I chewed into it. I learned some things, and then there were some things that I thought I wished were harder, and maybe we'll talk about that. But
yeah,
I mean, I'll tell you the good part first. So this is the new night report on trust, media, and democracy, and they put together a really interesting group of thinkers to write this thing. I mean, some people we know, some people who you expect on there, and then some other new names. And I found that really appealing.
And the Aspen Institute was kind of under their auspices, and they're historically terrific on journalism.
That being said, I thought that they bringing their gravitas to the issue was important, but I wasn't sure that they said anything that at least you and I don't already know.
Well, coming from, it reminded me of the kind of research and analyst reports we used to write at Jupiter, because there was always a big difference between a deep, exhaustive, kind of comprehensive survey of something in which you might get, to the extent that you got analytical, you would isolate all the problems and the issues, but not necessarily veer into hard action items. And I worry that for as good as some of these items were, that it came off a little bland and all-encompassing. Because if you read the press release and the preamble and why we're doing this, it was zeroed in on fake news and credibility and trust in American institutions and stuff like that. But then the report is much broader in terms of things that it addresses. And I hate to say, it sounded a little bit like it was trying to find solutions for the failing media business model, which is that at the center of this thing? I don't know.
Well, all right. So, we're looking at the graphic for those of you who are watching the video podcast. The headline is Crisis in Democracy. But it really is a journalism from,
journalism, the industry, not journalism, the kind of career or phenomena or
right. Right.
Yeah.
I guess what I would say, and kudos to the people involved for doing it, the idea that they're willing to say in a public forum, if we don't fix journalism, we can't, we're going to see democracy going down a slippery slope. I thought was what, I'd never heard it. I've never seen an institution make that statement as clearly as they did. And by the way, if the New York Times says that, or the Washington Post, or the Wall Street Journal, it's too self-serving, right? I mean,
yeah. Even if some of these people, have histories in many of those places. And again, I think you're right about that. And if you go right, they have like 10 main points, and where you don't have time to kind of go through them one by one. But but a couple of them are they're just a little. You would never argue with the fact that newsrooms need to look more like the communities around us, and there needs to be, they sound like the HR policy of a media company more than they do something that truly is going to change our issues around trust in the information. Now, some of them are great, but where I sort of have hammered away forever about the need for a new digitally enhanced version of media literacy among our populace, recognizing when there are ads, recognizing, what's going on, they kind of broaden it to a new sense of communication civics, and again, I just wish they were a little more hard hitting.
All right. So, I guess you and we talk about this a lot on the pod. My feeling is, if I say to you, Gene, we're going to go have ice cream, you and I. Do you want vanilla, chocolate, or strawberry? You can answer that question without a lot of thought, right? You have of those three. What's your favorite?
I'm vanilla.
Always. You're vanilla. Probably chocolate for me. Strawberry gets left on the side. Now you go to, Baskin Robbins, and there's mint chocolate chip and cookie cream and blah blah blah, and all of a sudden there's all these choices, and you're like, oh man, and I feel like a lot of what was at the subset of the report was we're overwhelming people with so much information that they don't trust any of us anymore. Like,
right.
And
right.
maybe there's a nostalgic rear view mirror Walter Cronkite thing going on. Like, couldn't we just go back to where we trusted the media? I'm like, yeah, I don't think we're going backwards, right?
Yeah, well, and they didn't dwell a lot on why it's come to this, which is, again, I don't necessarily think they should, but I just feel I have a few hangups where I just want to get your point of view on this, because it's a similar thing. Number 7 is invest in technology solutions to fight the spread of misinformation. This is one of the findings and admonitions. I mean, okay, yes, we should do that, but that's sort of like saying, we have a problem with false information and we need to do better at it by fighting it with technology. What? It's just not narrow enough.
For me, that issue comes down to identity. And,
I agree.
So I get probably 15 LinkedIn requests a day now from people who I'm about 90% sure are computers, not real people. And sometimes they do a good job of impersonating. They're in New York. They're in the media business. They know, so they've been liked by some people I know. And I'm like, that almost might be a real human. And sometimes they're like, I'm a student in a university and blah, blah, blah. And I'm interested. Like, sometimes they're terrible robots. But it does bother me that identity is not something that we protect. That being said, I have, 15 email addresses. Now, I use 5 of them, but I have 10 others that I used to use with other companies over the years. So if you were trying to legislate identity to rebuild trust, you would say everyone must have, one, real identity with one phone number. And I don't know. I mean, that seems like...
I think you're onto the bookends and the linchpins collectively of sourcing. Right? Is like, can I trust the source? And that can sometimes be the author, and sometimes it can be the institution, the New York Times, or Donald Trump himself. And I feel like you're right about something, which is if you're trying to spread something or promulgate something, you need to have the credibility of saying who it is that you are. Now, again, even saying that, I start to hedge a little bit, because obviously anonymous sources are really important, but these are kind of different things. But I like the subject matter you're talking about here, because we're talking about an issue that has to do with fake news and stuff.
All right, so at the risk of angering our listeners and angering you, is the whole idea of trust a little antiquated? I mean,
well, hard and clear trust with no gray areas is not only antiquated, it's a delusion that we ever had it, right? In some ways, we existed in this safe, cushy, create our own propaganda in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, where, like, we didn't even have to, worry. There was a very kind of America First media, and we had hard-hitting journalists, but there was such narrow distribution and places you could get things from that it just was more precise. But it's not like that anymore. Look, I think that trust is a big issue, but I would go towards trust in journalism itself. To me, a program to restore the sort of honor and nobility and importance of journalism as a career and as a pursuit is really important. Whereas this report has a number 10 that says a national program recommending 1 year of civic service for young people should be instituted. I'm sorry, I find that to be broad to the whole idea of government and being a citizen. Don't you kind of find that to be a little bit of
I,
kind of path.
I was puzzled by that as a recommendation, and I found myself wondering if that wasn't the Report for America folks
It got
raising their.
slipped in.
And,
Well, no,
no,
you're right.
I mean,
It's like if they had X number of people, someone got to put their thing in there. So you have kind of apples and oranges and plywood and things that don't necessarily, they don't add up the cohesive piece. They hammered away at transparency really well, but in kind of overlapping ways. You know, they say technology companies should be transparent about the influence of advertising and algorithms. I completely agree on that. You and I have talked about the idea of an ombudsman or whatever else. I think there should be a transparency in what you publish. Self-governing needs to improve, but I don't know.
I like that they tied income inequality to trust. I thought that was brave and not expected.
Yeah, but don't you think, I'll ask you this question as a follow-up to that. Do you think that they're politically dodging the issue of education as it relates to that? Because I do feel like, look, I may be wrong, and me and all the liberals that achieving college graduation, if those are the only people voting, it'd be like 80-20 liberal versus, conservative. And all I mean is that I feel like a more enlightened and educated population in general puts us in a better situation. And poverty in the last 25 years in this country has meant not access to education like it did in the post-war years.
I gotta say, just because we haven't talked since last week, the fact that Mitch McConnell said the idea of a national day off for the election was a Democratic power grab.
Oh, it's terrible.
Like voting, that's the thing those Democrats do.
Right. Talk about civics. It's. So I think there's a lot of code in some of these things, and I just, look, the depth of the report is amazing, but I think it's kind of like climate change. We don't need more exhaustive reports to explain to us the scope and the truth of the problem. We need to start working on solutions.
All right. So pod
and they didn't
listener.
mention legislation, by the way. Not a single mention about legislation.
Not well. So pod listeners, go and Google it. It's a couple of clicks to find it. We'll put a link in the show notes. It's definitely worth a read. I think probably if 10 people read it, 10 people each get something different out of it. I was glad to see it written. I think it's going to spin off a lot of good editorial and conversation, and it won't be the last time we talk about the issues that came out of the
Steve, one last piece. I think in the spirit of its inclusive political message, what I would appreciate is and I wish they had, I don't know the truth of this, some budget to distribute it and get it out there in elegant ways, right? If they had these little short videos on each of the 10 points, or they did something to get it into schools or kids, or had some airtime, what's the point of it if it's just kind of going into sort of inside baseball dialogue?
Oh, that's a great, I bet it's meant to be totally through free media. They put out a press release. I bet you're right. I bet there's no video backup for it.
It's done.
That's it. Wow. That's terrifying if that's true. But it does raise a good ancillary point, which is, I work with a bunch of different clients, and at some point in conversations, they always say, blah, 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 we're doing this video, and it's going to go viral. And, the idea that people don't understand that at some level, all media that you want to get seen by an audience requires a resource.
Yeah. And virality or whatever is, there are some people that are pretty good at generating it, but that's because they know the sort of, odds thing. You got to throw 10 pieces out there and one of them might take, and it's usually an accident or a faux pas that is what leads something to go viral. So, they're not really setting it up to go viral.
All right. So with that, let's move on to chapter 2. So our friends at IEEE wrote a terrific article, which I had not seen written anywhere else, about AI and lip reading. And right. At first I laughed and I thought that's kind of funny. And then I read it and then I thought, or that's incredibly creepy. Like,
Yeah.
you know, so first of all, you know, do, do you accept LipPass as a way to authenticate individuality? Is that like, does that work? I mean, that's the headline on the IEEE Spectrum articles. LipPass authenticates users based on the way they move their mouths.
Yeah, and let's just make the nod to the cultural references that are inevitable here. Um, Hal in 2001: A Space Odyssey, figures out he's being sabotaged by the astronauts by reading their lips when they think they're off in the corner quietly talking. And then there's the famous Seinfeld where Marlee Matlin helps George read the lips across the room at a party while he's trying to, find out what his girlfriend's up to. But look, I think this is about the broad. This is really the issue we have with our iPhones and our Androids and Siri right now, which is that we can be observed or caught or give away our privacy in the very act of trying to validate who we are, or using the privacy controls to get access to something. And I think that it's a kind of a mess right now. I don't want to leap to the other story, but they're both kind of in the similar vein, right? It's not just lip reading. In some cases, it's a little device that can hear the vibrations in your throat, so you can not even actually mouth the things. In other instances, they're sending sonar back and forth off your face from the phone to do a sort of a topographical reading. What do you find yourself frustrated by passcodes and fingerprints and facial recognition? I remember a year and a half ago, you were the first person I ever heard to use the facial thing on the new iPhone. How is that going?
So the other day I was walking down the street, it was cold out, and I was trying to open my phone and it wouldn't open, and I decided it was broken. I was thinking, damn, I'm gonna have to go back to the Apple store and get it fixed. And then I realized that I was wearing a black face mask to keep the cold away from my face, and in the process had confused my phone because that's not what I look like. And it wanted a password because some weird stranger person was holding my phone, which was me. But it surprised me how much I've now come to expect the facial sonar, as you so wisely called it, to just work. And
yeah, mine doesn't work so well. If I have my glasses on or off, if I'm wearing a hat or not,
really, yeah, no, I don't have
my facial hair changes once a week. I don't know what it is exactly, but it always feels like in the places where it's most dodgy is the places where you need it the most, where there's only a little bit of light, or you're kind of far away, you can't actually get it right in front of your face. I don't know. I found it to be frustrating, and it is. Look, I take it at face value. I think the IEEE stuff is amazing because that was a vivid description of something that feels like it's going to be real, even if it might be 2 or 3 years before it gets into something like a phone. But I don't know. Whatever happened to fingerprints, by the way? Is it that you can have a person knocked out and just sort of put their finger on the thing and open these things up?
Or cut their thumb off and then take it to the nuclear power plant? And I think I saw that movie where the terrorists take the person's thumb, and because it doesn't have to be a living, breathing thumb.
Yeah, it's what struck me in reading the first IEEE article, which is that what would be great is if there was a grab bag of 4 or 5 ways of verifying who someone is, and you didn't know when you're signing on what it was going to use, so that it's a little bit of a I don't know, it would somehow limit what crime could be done. But I guess I'm conflating a little because some of it is just when you talk to Siri or when you say something into your phone or Alexa, you can be overheard.
Yeah. And then, just to talk about passwords for a second, you call into your bank and they say, what was the name of your first pet? And I'm like, really? We're still using name of first pet as the,
I know. And here's the thing, Steve, because I feel like my texting recognition and completion, and I always call it Siri, but it isn't Siri. It's in the instant message field. And it's terrible. The voice approximation is terrible. And it's funny that you mentioned the pet's first name and the hospital you were born in and your wife's, maiden. It's the proper nouns that they never get right, right? So, right, it's like they'll get 90% of the short English words and things like that. And so I feel like that technology, that set of technologies, has been really not good for being out there for 3 or 4 years.
So let's jump to this second article, because I guess I found myself, as I read through it, wondering whether, like, does the idea that you wear something on, you wear a device on your face and it can read your lips because of facial movement, was that the
the idea is that even if you took out the audio, and even if you took out the lips, everything else you're doing apparently has some recognizably unique and repeatable facial movements and vibrations of parts of your, chest, throat, whatever. It sounds a little nutty to me, but I understand what they're talking about. At first, when I was reading the article, I thought it was don't move your lips and speak ventriloquist style, and then it'll have the ability to understand. But I don't. It was amusing.
Yeah, I guess I like your idea. The more I think about it, I like multiple forms of identity that you don't know which one it's testing. I think that's appealing. All right,
and I feel like thumbprints and fingerprints are not bad. I always feel that's a solid place to be on this. And I don't know.
All right, note to the editorial team: we ought to do a whole episode on identity recognition, like that, like passwords and silly bank questions and all that.
And avatars, your visual personal expression. That's a big deal, and it's a generationally different deal, right?
Do you have an avatar?
Well, I mean, depending on who you're talking to, avatar simply means your icon on any of your social media versus the idea of it being an animated view or something. My daughter's created a Bitmoji for me that is uncanny, and with that app, there's a keyboard that you can access that has like 1,000 different things that I'm doing, from rock on to,
it's great,
whatever, to I don't really use it because it's kind of embarrassing, but I thought it might be cute if you and I eventually went to that as a way to bind our brand.
So Spotify has a, not Spotify, Instagram, no, the other one, has a Snapchat has a Bitmoji, and
right.
And I built one and it looks like me, and I think it lives on a map. I think it actually, for people that follow me, I think you know where I am if you see my little avatar guy. All right, so we have just enough time to actually dive into the Chapter 3 piece of the show, which is Bezos and Blackmail. So let's just start at the very highest level. Bezos writes this thing. He comes out on Medium and basically tells the whole story, publishes all the legal, letters. Gene, thumbs up, thumbs down on the Bezos move?
I think it's amazing that he did it. I think that it's easy to take pot shots and kind of make fun of the degree of vanity or ego might have been involved, or what you can do when you've got several $1 billion versus not, but it doesn't matter. If he's, someone who is boxing in one of the most horrific and sad forms of non-journalism, I thought it was unbelievable, and it's very interesting. Whether it ties directly into things like the Saudis and Trump or not is a little bit irrelevant. And it actually points up, this is a good bookend to the media, the media future piece, and that report, because this is some of it in the flesh. And one thing I think that I would like to see is, if you're a journalistic entity or a media property, your content creation budget and resources, not your sources, should be transparent. right? I should be able to know that they paid someone to give them this story or to block the story or whatever else. And that's kind of what he's getting them on.
I thought it was, not to oversell it, spectacular.
Yes.
I thought it was like, F you, back at you. Oh, and by the way, you signed a consent decree that said you weren't going to break the law for 3 years, which I find a strange bit of language. Like, you can break the law in 3.5 years, just not for 3 years. And then, so there was some debate on one of the shows over the last couple of days about whether or not it actually is extortion. Because extortion, I guess, in the most specific legal terms, means you have to ask for money. And what they were so there is going to be a debate about whether or not it's actually extortion or not. But I just think, I'm stunned at how close to criminal prosecution in prison Pecker went, that he would be back at it so fast. Like, I mean,
yeah,
I mean, even if Trump called him and said, listen, is there any way you can get the Washington Post to stop following this, story? It would seem like the answer would be, sorry, Donald, I just dodged a bullet. Like, we're going to go back to putting, pictures of Roseanne Barr on the cover or whatever. Like,
yeah, it's like a certain form of criminal that has gotten so used to getting away with things that they have an arrogance that's almost mind-boggling, and you never know. It means, like, somewhere at some level they want to get caught versus, and that's why Bezos' move is really amazing, whether it's legal extortion or not. He de-weaponized, their approach, right?
Yep.
That suddenly he didn't care. And it reminded me actually a little bit of Hamlet. Now that we all know the play, whether we've been to it or not, in the story, the fact that, late in his, that his political career got ruined because he was being blackmailed, and he decided to just go public with it, even though it ruined his marriage, just to sort of give them nowhere else to move in terms of blackmail and extortion.
Yeah,
but
I think the story is not over. I think that Bezos is not going to be afraid. I think it gives law enforcement a real I'm sorry, isn't, like, breaking the law 101 if you're a lawyer, isn't rule 1, like, you don't write that crap down.
Don't write that crap down.
Maybe you whisper it on the phone, maybe you have a secret meeting, but you don't send a letter that says, if you don't stop covering this story, we're going to release naked pictures of you. Like,
it's insane. And also, it is not so far-fetched, the connections to Trump and the politics and the probe and all that other stuff. Because, look, we're talking about almost analogous situations. Trump, marital infidelity, scandal, whatever, doesn't get published.
Yep.
Bezos, all that same stuff does get published. And then you've got these Saudi connections in the Post and all this other stuff. And, this is going to be the sad truth in the end with Trump, is that the sordidness and the not even the fact that he does everything illegally, the fact that it's going to be the budget for the inauguration parties. It's like how they got Capone on, accounting.
All right. So thumbs up to Bezos.
Yes.
Luke
also, that he sent it out on Medium. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, I wonder why. I wonder why. I thought about that.
Well, I think it's a publishing. I think he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to deal with the complexity issues that he. I can't remember. He nounized a verb or something and decomplexifies.
Yeah, I never heard that before. It
was unbelievable. He's
that
talking about the conflation. I mean, the issues of
his own paper,
Amazon.
Yeah.
And so I think it was like he wasn't going to go there. It was too long for a tweet. There wasn't a blog post. He had to have a personal place, and I think it underscores where Medium is at today. If anyone's familiar with the Players Trib, which is now where any athlete says something personal and publicly, Medium, for a wide range of public figures is a place where you do that now.
We are out of time. Fabulous. Here, wait, we're ready. I'm not going to speak. I'm just read my lips.
I'm just going to vibrate my lips.
Yeah.
All right.
Have a good week.
This was a good one, Steve.
Yeah.
See you everyone next time.
All right, bye-bye.